it's MJ from Ultra Love TV. How are you? I just came on and my hair was like, mrr. Thank you so much. One of you asked in a recent video if I could explain shadow work. And it's really interesting the way these terms and things come up in our collective awareness, right? Because actually, if I'm honest, shadow work as an expression didn't really start to land for me probably until a couple years ago. After I published my book, which talks about emotional triggers, waves, and storms, and how to, in a really potent, present, and mindful way, use your mindfulness, breath awareness, meditation practice, and presence to transform emotional density, I call it. And then to ultimately endeavor to shapeshift our perspective, to have a more harmonious perspective. And that this emotional alchemical process is super duper transformational, healing, enlightening, and yet it's ugly. Because shadow work dives us into our unconscious, essentially, because of, and it's deep depending on our own personal karma and our own personal awareness, right? So, and the reason it's called shadow work is that when we're doing it, it's like, you know, and it's also the shadow. It's owning and transfer, and the way I interpret it in the book is I call it about owning and transforming your whole reality. And so that means anytime you're triggered, you then feel the trigger and you endeavor to like hold space for yourself and breathe through waves. And then often in my experience, the waves then become emotional storms. And the emotional storm alchemical process, holla, Scott, that's a lot in the house. The emotional storm as a process, like as a meditative, mindful healing process, can really truly liberate us from, again, density, and or help us relieve ourselves from, again, I call them like the lower bass tone emotions, or in the book, just the emotions that really come out of fear, separation, and these core wounds across the human consciousness, which to me is like a false perception, because it, like, basically so much of our world is based on that false perception that we're separate from the world around us, instead of the unified field quantum perspective, which most empaths have naturally been guided to, because life on a sentient emotional level has been super duper intense. So the empath community are people that have really never been able to truly deny their emotions, because it's been such a visceral thing, right? And then uncovering deeper levels of wounding. So yeah, to me, I mean, of course, these things have just been around for aeons, like forever or whatever. It's just that we all, in our own experience, are coming to different modalities. And then one thing that I enjoy as a practice and then share with you guys is like deductionary reasoning, and like aligning with our divine mind through this heart space, and endeavoring to kind of expose the wounds, right? And really work through them so that we can shine light for one another. You know, that's all it is, really. And yet, increasingly on my journey, that's why I like to share with all y'all lovers, is because I'm, as you know, a sensitive. It's like when we're relating to people on this journey, it's super duper expansive to continue to relate from the emotional biofeedback loop. Like, how is it feeling relating? And if we end up in emotional patterns, we can actually like heal ourselves, or dissolve toxic patterns more quickly when we're really owning our emotion, right? And observing the self in totality, and doing this conscious transformational work is ultimately super duper liberating, but it's sticky, hence shadow. Like shadow, what, you know, what's behind us with the glare of the sun. Like, it's, we can all project certain illusions, but deeply, what, like, we all know we're having thoughts, we're having feelings, and mostly collectively, dominantly, the reason we're in this transformational time, in my perspective, is like we're undergoing a totally divine human paradigm shift. So all of us in our own miraculous ways are going through these like, whoa, what's going on here actually? And then to, again, why I share is like to really like come into that alignment piece, we have to be owning and transforming our emotional densities. So that is how I interpret shadow work. And essentially, if we're in denial, if we're not owning and transforming our emotions, if we haven't been practicing self-responsibility, conscious transformation, various things, it's easy to bypass. So people talk about spiritual bypassing, which is, yeah, when people are just not aware, or they're hiding, essentially, right? We all do it to certain degrees, and yet the loop back, certainly in my own practice, is to always come back to my own heart space and feeling clear within myself, my direction, my vision, and then allowing the alignments to continue to kind of loop in and or fall away, right? Depending on our personal point of attraction, our personal guidance, and what we're working through in our lives, right? I'm getting that sense of like just reminding us all of like the illusory capacity of the media and how it propagates like enlightenment or ascension or anything authentic. It's such a unique visceral experience from within the self that it's like we can't put there's so much bounty, my lovers. And actually, if I'm straight up legit, like today has been one of those days of like the depth, profundity, glory, and beauty of all that is life, all that is existence, and all that is the backbone of that, like speechless in moments, just completely like brr, like life is surreal, yo. Hey y'all, how are ya? Ash Korolef, Maxine, Eddie Machetti. Hey Scott, anger has been quite something I've often squashed down out of fear of violence, but learning to anger and be still. Holla! Anger, again, for me, that was some of the most powerful transformational trigger points, was like getting enraged or angry about like fairly trivial things, right? Which in fairness, going way back like 10 odd years ago, that practicing meditation, diligently yoga meditation, and then getting the triggers, knowing this whole you're creating your reality, I'm like, wait, if I'm creating my reality, why am I doing that? And then I had to like penetrate the veil of the anger. And I recently explained it to somebody, like, what's that process? And I'm like, well, you have to sit with it, not blame and attack other people for how you feel. And it's deep. We so easily just go, whoa, you're doing that, like, I don't like how that feels, like, back off. Or oh gosh, and then I have to always, like, this is the point, I think, of just being a human, but one on the journey. It's like, you always have to look at the self, and like, that's the point of taking space for self to discern stuff. It's like, what is that reaction? Why am I doing that? And like, what layer am I acting out? And yet, no matter what, still coming back to one's own heart space to relieve the self of distortion, separation, grievance, right? And yet, right, Scott, so that is a piece, especially those sensitive empaths, like hardcore doing this work, when we're encountering people in our reality, discerning energies, if we get that loop, it could be very well our intuition going back off. And that's part of breaking out of the fracking people-pleasing patterns, right? Because empaths and emotionally sensitive people can be in patterns that enable emotionally detached people to never have to fucking own their emotion, right? And never have to actually do the inner work. And ultimately, I believe on some capacity, there's this total global awakening, spontaneous for all. Like, there's just, people are just like, wow, whoa, we're all unified, and like, whoa, this is Shazam. So all of us continuously get better at holding space and working through and exposing more of our wounds and being like, what the fuck is life? And, and keep on keeping on working through. At the same time, again, that emotional mental discernment, and plus we're in crazy times, right? We're in very transformational times. Like, there's aspects of our whole human paradigm, like everything that we once believed in is shattering in front of us and or collapsing out from underneath us. And again, those of us in these cycles are really having to own the self and say no, yes, no, holla Shazam, no to the, like a Matrix ninja, right? Like really, really, like setting your own stage, as it were, for the world that you're creating for yourself, right? because gosh, this manifestation journey, it's so profound, it's so real. And yet when you arrive home in your beingness, there, it is undeniable, right? When you're reaching into higher heights, it's undeniable. And it's truly only our own mental attachment to what we think or what we perceive or how we individuate our projection of how it's going to manifest. That's often, I think, when we get looped back at testify, because it's happening faster and faster. Things are working out, things are running. They're like boom, boom, boom. What the fuck is this asking me to do now, right? Like, holy Shazam! And then it's, to me personally, it's always about finding a greater loving capacity for the self, which then inspires a greater, higher harmonic of like loving vibrational thought, which then allows me to like see other things. And then it's all intertwined because there's no separation. So I'm starting, we heal more of the heart, and then certain aspects of like my habits and patterns come up. And then miraculously it gets easier, for example, to maybe have less tobacco or whatever it might be. The clarity of the expression into love of self becomes better when you're doing the shadow work, holla Shazam, because it gets more clear. If you're not doing, it's like basically if you're not owning your projections, if you're not owning and transforming your mental blah blah blah, there's just going to be a bunch of loops of like pushing things away, sabotaging, low vibratory, essentially like low vibratory heaviness, fear, boredom, anxiety, depression, and holla Shazam, right? There's nothing wrong with any of the experiences that any of us have ever. Because, I mean, fuck, just this morning, I'm sure I was like sitting somewhere, or like lots of times when I'm in my car, I'm just like, like, energy is just moving through me. The practice is just to not judge the self. And the reason people bypass shadow work is because, one, as a collective, we're taught to shame it and judge it. Like, whoa, what's wrong with you for having all those feelings? Whoa, like, are you depressed? Like, oh my God, like, ugh. Or people sit in judgment of anger or it's just, it's so profound and multi-layered and multi-leveled, right? But straight up, and as we head into these times, it's like coming into the heart center of the self. Did you see I just picked my nose then? Coming into the heart center of the self, unifying with the mind, getting as clear as we can through loads of self-love, loads of meditation, loads of all the like not engaging with stuff that triggers us, not engaging with stuff that is telling us what to do or telling us how to live or telling us how things should be. Just being in your present field and loving the totality of yourself, the totality of your present, let everybody off the hook, forgive it all, and like straight up legit step into the heart of truth, which to me is like be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and keep following that bliss, keep following that joyful elixir. And here's the Butin is like, again, that following the bliss, shadow work is part of that following the bliss. That's, I think, where our human ego gets tripped up. But I was in bliss yesterday. Or like, in that moment I felt bliss. Great. But you're going to still have to keep dealing with the momentum, with the spirals, with the waveforms, with the totality of your infinite quantum eternal journey of existence, right? And so how we're working with our own individual energy is just like the next step in the quantum human experience, and shadow work is a big piece. In my terminology in the Fearless Life Guide and in Alta Love's terms, we call it the emotional storm. Owning, and the language that I use is owning and transforming your life, your experience, and then certainly looking at the densities. That's blame and attack energy, divide and conquer, us against them, he's in this, she's in that. Now we can hold space and this is where discernment is. I can own my emotions, and yet when it comes to my relationships, when it comes to my work, when it comes to my I'm continuously discerning, wait, is this person? How do I feel after this? And what's really going on here? And it gets easier and easier to sort of cut out the bull, because the more in alignment you become, the more obvious it is where people aren't in alignment in their own field, where they're saying one thing and doing another, where they're expressing one thing but the feeling expression is a different feeling, where they might say one thing and then actually you look and you're thinking that's not at all what's going on. So it's like that's living beyond the illusion, right? That's living in the quantum field. That's living in a fifth dimensional reality construct, right? Because it's ultimately never about the other, and yet the service to the whole. And this is so much about the Aquarian age, right? And it's known deeply within the self, which nobody can judge you, put it on you, and you them, right? But we know when we know we're in service to the whole. And we have worked through enough of that divisive energy to know the difference. Because none of ultimately what we're bridging into from that quantum perspective resonates with the old paradigm. Because the old paradigm is it's an illusion. It's based in an illusion. And that is weird as a human in the 3D. What? Everything I'm doing, it's like, yeah, it's fucking crazy. And we all sold out at some point. Now we have to bring it home for this whole story of saving the planet before whatever. And yet the quantum field bridges us into timelessness, bridges us into infinite capacity and multidimensional realities for this earth, intergalactic travel, resources and energy resources that can bring us all the things we need absolutely abundantly without fucking controlling overlords. And yet it is a unified field for us to contain our relationship for the external illusion construct of authority. And that's part of divine law. That's why love and compassion reign supreme, my lovers. Because from the perspective of divine law, you're not going to act out of accordance with divinity and unity. That's why the empathic heart space reigns supreme. That's why the early lessons landed home. Because when I killed that little bug when I was 4 years old, I felt that was a move that didn't feel good. I didn't like having to do that, right? And then not long after became a vegetarian and became a vegan, right? When I lied when I was little, there was a moment of recognition where I knew that lying didn't feel good. Oh my goodness, I just made it up to like save my face at 5 years old, but I knew that didn't feel good. When first time I saw a homeless person in the city, I'm sure I probably started crying. My mom was like, oh shit, mom, she's a sensitive. Life's gonna be fucking hard for her. So seeing a homeless person and feeling like, why is that, right? If you hurt somebody, you feel it. And because that doesn't feel good, you endeavor not to do it. But then most of us got to this crux point of trying to fit in and trying to give and trying to give and trying to make it all good for everybody else. We realized that we were fucking ourselves over. Enter shadow work. And like for a lot of empaths, the shadow work actually started from a very, very young age. Being bullied, being dumped on, and not wanting to be a bother, right? So we start doing this emotional alchemical work from a very young age, which is part of this cruxy meeting point of the old paradigm and the new paradigm. And the way we're shifting from within this self to project a new reality into the quantum field. And yet all of this is totally divine. Like I'm not in control. There's just a grung, 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 like the flow of life. And then like now I'm doing this and now I'm doing this. Increasingly and truly from within your point of attraction, there's money falls away. External authority falls away. Those external fucking barriers and limitations fall away. It's just you and your field and regenesis, and eventually you just know. I've now transformed more of those bass tones, and now I'm arriving to a different level of my manifestation mastery, right? As far as like containing, thus teaching and sharing and exposing and loving people through this process. And yet from within the self, you loving the unified field within the self to continue to empower the true journey, right? That we're on, and to not allow ourselves to continue to feed old constructs of disempowered relationship, abuse. And that looks different for everybody. you know, but we abuse ourselves in various ways. And yet I would say some of the heart stuff and relationships trumps any other. You know, being in toxic human relationships, I would say, is just as detrimental, if not totally intertwined with the toxic behaviors that we employ to further hurt ourselves, right? So holla Shazam, I saw you, Dustin. I see you, baby. Shaking that ass. I see you. They are proactive dreamers, and that's a big part of the shadow work, is that, whoa, wow, this fear, wow, this, and stepping into it, right? Like, that's, I think one of the videos I even say that, as far as like the emotional storm, i.e. the shadow work, is me holding space for like having complete financial collapse and owning that after publishing the book and blah, 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 and being like, well, holla Shazam, look what you be creating, let's look at this and let's close the gap. But it's fucking intense, lava. Like, that's why I'm not interested particularly in making any of what I expose or put out there some kind of glamour slick product, because shadow work isn't glamorous and slick. Being in your heart isn't necessarily what the world wants us to be, as far as like, I just want to tell you guys that there's 3 quick fixes. I mean, there are quick fixes, and as such as like your breath will take you home right there and then. It's just that most of us have such a frazzled mental state through various loops, I would say, of distortion within the field and or the matrix and or whatever we want to call it. And yet still, no matter what, you're the only one that can find your way home. And it's in your heart, and it's in your feeling body, and it's in your totality acceptance of all that is. All the fear, all the ugliness, all the fucking hurting one another, you know? The deepest darkness is also of the greatest light, you know? Felt? There, boom, Sasti, you feel your way through the pain. You own it. Yeah, holla Shazam, lava. I am having a storm, right? And like straight up, that's something that's been going on for me like on the daily almost. And that it is, energies are moving through us, and we can just keep, and like the more we do it, the better we get at doing it. The more we do it, the better we get at doing it. More of us doing it. And then we feel it. We feel the realness, right, of the transformational tool that we are, not anything outside of self. But let us not harp on ourselves or be hard on ourselves if we are using things to help us with this intensity of life, right? One way or the other. Yeah, it's like total freedom, total non-judgment. And it's deep, right? We know it hurts. Ugh, but this is part of why it's like, I know it's a lifelong mish, because as far as I'm aware, like, as long as there's distortion out there in the world, as long as there is oppression, as long as there's corruption, as long as there's fucking bullshit that just hurts the planet or hurts or enslaves the people, I'll keep doing shadow work the rest of my life. You know, that's the Ulta Love Mish. It's real. This transformation is happening, and we're going to just keep transforming the bull until we know we're clear of it. And it does happen. The clarity does happen. It's just not at all how we think as an individual. But the inner work does assist us to keep leveling up, to see more clearly, to live with more compassion, to live with more integrity, to live with more authenticity. Think about it. Simples. More and more people, more and more people, more and more people, boom. Before we know it, we're in this new world. We're in this new, expansive, more compassionate, more ability to hold space for self and other, to be like compassionate to the self when we're in the storms. Like, that's a big deal too. Like, being in that and going like, oh, because there's so many layers, right? And thank you, Sas, for mentioning that, because that's it. We're burnt. And that is a spiritual practice. That's in yogic tradition. It's called the sheaths, the energetic sheaths of the body, and how I interpret them. Oh my gosh, I think I know that person. How peculiar. Any of you guys, I think that's my cue. And it can't come soon enough. I love you guys. I'm gonna speak to you real soon. And I would just feel guided to sort of reach out to that person. Okay, lots of love, you guys. I love you. Bye.